Last week we finished up chapter 17, had a few verses to go through, and we began in chapter 18. And we said that chapter 18, along with actually chapter 19, the next one, talk about attitudes that bring either sorrow or success. And I asked the question, what is attitude? And attitude is the way we look at life. It is the way we choose to see and respond to events. And I made the comment, notice I said respond and not react. Big difference between these two words. What does it mean to respond to a situation? It means to think about it, to use reason to find the solution, and take the appropriate measures. When you react, you skip the reasoning stage and do what comes naturally in the moment, which is a lot of times probably not good. I asked the question, how does attitude affect everything we do in life? Well, we make matters pleasant or miserable, difficult or easy, good or bad, all by the attitude with which we approach them. Our attitude is not something that just happens. We choose our attitude. Now that's based upon our experiences, the way we were brought up, things we've had to deal with. I asked the question, are you a glass half full or half empty person, pessimist or optimist? And again, that has a lot to do with the experiences that you've had in life. Main thing is, remember I gave you a formula, E plus R equals O. Event plus response usually equals your outcome. You see, no matter how bad things get in life, we must still be thankful for everything we still have and put things in perspective. We also talked about judgment and judging others. And I want to make sure of a point that was brought up afterwards. Jeanette made this comment to me on Sunday night. She said there in Matthew, the 7th chapter, verses 1 through 5, that is not a prohibition against judging, but it is a warning, and a warning that needs to be taken seriously. And that's what Wayne was trying to get across when we do judge others. How we judge others will be the same way that we will be judged. And there's an old saying that goes, those who live in a glass house shouldn't throw stones because they'll come back to haunt you. So very true. And we talked about what we can't judge. We can't judge matters of the heart. Only God can do that. Like we used to say in the Marine Corps, that's above my pay grade. and we let God judge the matters of the heart. Are there any questions on what we kind of discussed last week or what I reviewed here this morning so far? Okay, let's begin with verse 6 and 7 of chapter 18. Solomon writes, a fool's lips enter in contention, and his mouth calls for blows. Verse 7, a fool's mouth is his destruction, and his lips are the snare of his soul. I like how the NIV says it. He says, a fool's lips bring him strife, and his mouth invites a beating. Pretty serious. When some fool starts an argument, it's like he's asking for a beating. I mean, how true is that? We have discussed this before, that a fool will soon be recognized by the way he speaks. He will meddle in disputes which are none of his business, and thereby bringing strife and reprisals upon himself. Question: have you ever had someone who has no business try and tell you what to do? Amen. What do you want to do? You want to take them out and back and beat them like a redheaded stepchild? No offense to any redheads in the audience. Of course, I'm just kidding. Anyway, but yeah, they don't make any sense. They don't know what they're talking about. And so many times it's unchristlike their their answer to your situation. So we have to be careful. That's what that's talking about. Solomon says in verse 7 that the fool's mouth leads to his undoing because his uncontrolled tongue will soon snare him, and that which is sinful. We know that James chapter 3 goes into great discussion about the tongue and how hard it is to control. We could spend an entire lesson on that one chapter alone. Any thoughts or comments on verses 6 or 7? Wayne. Right. Yeah. Yep. At some point. Yeah. When you stand before God, absolutely. That's a great point. Yeah. It's irritating when somebody tries to tell you what to do and they have not a clue. Anyway, any other comments? Good one. Okay, let's go to verse 8. Verse 8 reads, "The words of a talebearer are like tasty trifles, and they go down into the inmost body." The words of a talebearer. Who are we talking about? Yeah, a whisperer, one who gossips. Solomon says here that the talebearer speaks words that seem to be choice morsels. But those who are eager to hear slander will sooner or later learn that the effect will be like eating poisoned food. It's not good. Does anything ever come from gossip? It really only makes matters worse. Half the time they don't get a story correct. It's like that old game you used to play, telephone. Somebody starts a conversation, by the time it gets to the end, not a clue what was the original intent. We should not gossip. Absolutely never. Any thoughts? We all agree. Verse 9. "He who is slothful in his work is a brother to him who is a great destroyer." We've already read in Proverbs and talked about many times those who are lazy, those who don't work. You don't work, you don't eat. You're bound for a lifetime of poverty if you don't want to work. But Solomon takes it a step further and says this: you are a brother to a great destroyer, or as the King James says, a great waster. People who waste their time doing nothing get themselves in trouble more times than not. Idle hands, we know what that happens and leads to. Any thoughts on that? Yes. Yeah. That's right. When you don't put your best foot forward, if you will, your best effort into something, why bother to do it? It's like kids in school when I was teaching. Jason's experiencing the same thing in shop. He gives them a project to do, and I mean, oh my goodness. It's terrible because they don't have any pride in their work. They don't want to do their best. It's just enough to get by. You know, they build a toolbox that's bad. Any other thoughts? Good point on that. All right, let's look at verse 10. "The name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous run to it and are safe." Solomon says here that God is the refuge and strength of those who put their trust in Him. The name of the Lord signifies all that He is. His love, His mercy. He knows everything. He's all-powerful. He's everywhere at the same time. Solomon tells us here the righteous turn to the Lord as their only real source of security. How true that is. The Hebrew writer in chapter 13, verse 6 says, "So we may boldly say, the Lord is my helper. I will not fear. What can man do to me?" What do we have to fear when we have God on our side? Shouldn't be fearing nothing. Thoughts or comments? Okay, moving on to verse 11 and 12. They kind of go together. The rich man's wealth is his strong city, and like a high wall in his own esteem. Verse 12, before destruction the heart of a man is haughty, before honor is humility. Being wealthy can sometimes lead to a false sense of security, can't it? Hey, I got lots of money, what have I got to worry about? The illusion, and that's what it is, the illusion of wealth, is that it offers a greater security than it can provide. The rich man tends to trust in his wealth as though he is secure and protected, as the example here, by a high wall that cannot be climbed. No, that's not true. But his security is only imaginary and is a delusion. As Solomon points out in verse 12, pride blinds him to reality and leaves him vulnerable to complete destruction. That's what's going to happen. Humility is often cited as the necessary predecessor of honor. Remember the story of Jesus and the apostles in Mark chapter 9. Let's turn over there. Mark 9 and beginning in 33, it reads, "Then he came to Capernaum, and when he was in the house, he asked them, 'What was it you disputed among yourselves on the road?'" Like he didn't know. But they kept silent, for on the road they had disputed among themselves who would be the greatest. And he, Jesus, sat down, called the 12, and said to them, "If anyone desires to be first, he shall be last of all and servant of all." When we put ourselves higher than we should, we get ourselves in trouble. We are at the bottom. We should always consider ourselves to be humble. Humility is a great attribute to have. Any thoughts or comments on that? Esteem one another, yeah. I can't remember where that's at off the top of my head either. But that's very true. Watch out for others. Verses 13 through 15 look at being judgmental. Verse 13 says, "He who answers a matter before he hears it, it is folly and shame to him." Question: how many times have we jumped to a conclusion about something before we have heard all the facts? Oh, mercy for sure. Yeah. Remember that old TV show, Dragnet? Joe Friday? Just the facts, ma'am, just the facts. That's all he wanted was the facts. You have to hear all the facts. So many people are ready with answers to give you before they know what the problem is. First of all, they need to listen, and they don't. They have a decision before they have heard all the evidence. Solomon points out here, one who speaks before listening usually possesses an arrogant spirit and is unwilling to be instructed. How true that is. Not only is his attitude wrong, but he will be shamed by giving the wrong answer. Therefore, it's foolish to give an answer before listening. To me, that's common sense. So many times, though, common sense doesn't come into play. I like Burton Kaufman. he's a little bit more blunt about this. In his commentary, he says about this verse, to answer a question before you heard it out is both stupid and insulting. He gets to the point. And that's true. Any thoughts, Dustin? Yeah. Yeah. There's, many times the difference between listening and understanding. We can sometimes listen, but we don't understand what's being said to us. Other thoughts or comments? That's a great. Yeah. What is that? That three? Huh? Yeah. Yes, dear, you're right. Yeah, that's 4 words that will never get you in trouble. Huh? Sure. Yeah. 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 I mean, it's the nature of man in himself to want to solve problems. Uh, and sometimes we just need to listen and ask the person bluntly, what can I do to help? Or how would you like me to respond? So important. Other comments? Okay? Oh, absolutely. A friend of mine when I was growing up in Hanford, Larry Jones, about 4 or 5 years older than I was, he liked to go to the mall and just sit and watch people. You can learn a great deal about people just by watching them. I'll never forget that. Other comments? Okay. Let's go to verse 14. Verse 14 reads, the spirit of a man will sustain him in sickness, but who can bear a broken spirit? A person's attitude, for good or bad, is the most important factor in dealing with problems. Spirit in this passage is the inner being of man, the seat of his vigor, his courage. A merry heart is like good medicine. We've seen that in chapter 17, verse 22. Yeah. Attitude. How does attitude affect one's health? Immensely. Yeah. I don't know. There's factual evidence that people who have positive attitudes and good spirit recover faster, quicker from being sick than others who don't have that kind of attitude. So having a positive attitude is a good thing. Good thing. Any other thoughts? Okay, moving on. Verse 15 says, the heart of the prudent acquires knowledge, and the ear of the wise seeks knowledge. Solomon says here that the prudent person gets knowledge because he seeks it, because his ears are always open to learning. Wisdom. He never gets so smart that he stops searching for the truth. That's the key, I think, to somebody who is really trying to learn as they go through life. You never stop learning. Or you shouldn't anyway. Because I don't know everything. I don't think you know everything. We'll learn every day of our lives. Learn every day. We have a paradox here I wrote down. It says, finish this thought for me. Those that know the most know what? The least. They know the little. Okay? So very true. It's the same thought that Paul stressed in 1 Corinthians 8 and 12. If you like, or 8 and 2, I'm sorry, if you'd like to turn over with me. 1 Corinthians 8 and 2. I like this. Apostle Paul wrote, if anyone thinks that he knows anything, he knows nothing, yet as he ought to know. How very, very true. Any additional thoughts or comments? Okay, let's look at verse 16. A man's gift makes room for him and brings him before great men. The right use of gifts can open the doors of opportunity. Question, are we talking here about bribes? No, I don't think so. I don't think that's the intent here. What is meant is that gifts from benevolent people are effective in bringing many honors to the giver. And not only to great men, but to respected institutions in society. Example, hospital donors. Okay? What happens when somebody gives a large sum of money to a hospital? Yeah, name the wing after them. All right? Or they get their name on a plaque, okay? And people don't do that to get their name on a plaque. They do that to help people. They have the means and the ability to provide a necessary thing that's needed for hospitals. They don't do it for the honor or the glory that it brings them, but it does show them to be an honorable person. My point is, therefore, use possessions wisely and generously rather than selfishly. I think that makes a lot of sense. Thoughts or comments? Let's look at verse 17. The first one to plead his cause seems right until his neighbor comes and examines him. I like this. I like this. What Solomon's saying is, a person who tells his side of the story first seems to be, for the moment, right. However, both sides should be heard before the first story, so that the first story may be proved either way. If someone else is allowed to ask questions and scrutinize the evidence, then usually the truth will come out. Truth does not fear investigation, and if a person fears cross-examination, he is likely to be found in error. I always liked it when, I had a saying, there's three sides to every story. There's his side, and somewhere in the middle is probably the truth. And so you have to be wise enough, if you will, to listen to both sides and try to figure it out. So many times that happened in school. And you finally, hopefully, get to the truth. Hopefully. In other words, evidence of one person alone is not much to be depended upon. Okay? This is an old, or a variation of the old proverb, one tale is good till another is told. You have to be careful. Any thoughts or comments on that? Verse 18. Casting lots causes contentions to cease and keeps the mighty apart. We know that casting lots was a common procedure for Jews who viewed this as a means of turning any controversy over to God. Traditionally, they would place marked stones or tablets into a bag or an urn, shake it, and the first one that pops out, that was the one that was chosen. How or why would this be a good method to settle disputes or contentions or arguments? Why would this be a good way? Everybody has an equal chance. It takes away any chance of partiality, prejudice. Yeah. In Acts chapter 1, verses 15 through 26, that's how Matthias was picked, by casting lots. This was a peaceful method to remove all contention. It's done a number of times. Numbers 26 and 55, they cast lots for land. So this was a well-recognized procedure, and one that showed no partiality and was very fair. Any thoughts or comments? Mary? Casting lots is kind of like rolling dice, I guess. You have some marked stones in a bag or an urn. It's shaken up, and either the first one that comes out is the one that's chosen. So it takes away any means of cheating, if you will. It's all random. Whatever number comes up, that's what that means. Any other thoughts? Or yeah. There needs to be a little uniformity there. Yeah. Okay. Verse 19. A brother offended is harder to win than a strong city, and contentions are like the bars of a castle. Solomon makes the point here that controversies must be settled fairly. If a brother or a close friend has been defrauded, he is made like an irreconcilable enemy. He shuts his heart against all feelings of tenderness towards that person. Question: is it going to be easy to win that brother back if that happens to him? No, it's not. Contentions lead to disputes. Disputes can lead to lawsuits. Apostle Paul made it pretty clear about lawsuits among the brethren in 1 Corinthians 6, 1 through 8. We need to choose our words kindly, with grace and honor when we speak to somebody. Even if they're in the wrong, how we correct them is important. Any thoughts or comments on that? Yeah. It hurts. It hurts. Okay, moving on. Verses 20 through 24 in chapter 18 here and all of chapter 19 look at the attitudes that bring success. Verses 20 and 21, a man's stomach shall be satisfied from the fruit of his mouth, and from the produce of his lips he shall be filled. Verse 21, death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruit. Solomon says here that a person is rewarded according to the way he speaks, which is the fruit of his mouth. We've seen this before in chapters 12 and 14 and 13 and 2. If he speaks that which is good, he will enjoy good things. But if he speaks evil like the liar or the talebearer, he shall reap strife and hurt. Ephesians 4:29 backed that up. The tongue will bring forth either life or death by the way it is used. Let's turn to Matthew 12 and 37. Jesus himself says, "For by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned." Any thoughts about that verse? 12 and 37 talks about by our words we will be justified, and by our words we'll be condemned. Carefully choose our words. Absolutely. Carefully choose our words. Verse 21 parallels a previous proverb but adds in an inference that one should not fall in love with talking too much. Kind of like what Justin was talking about. Be careful. Sometimes it's better just to not say anything. Verse 22. He who finds a wife finds a good thing and obtains favor from the Lord. A wife who is virtuous and prudent brings a man abundant favor from the Lord. We've seen this before in chapter 19, or we'll see it in 19 and 14. And also when we get over to the last chapter in Proverbs 31, the last 21 verses deal with the virtuous woman. Very, very true. Now this does not say that every wife is a blessing. Because a woman who does not fear the Lord will be, as we learned in chapter 12:4, be as rottenness in his bones. Yes, he would. Yes, he would. First-hand experience. So, many, many times. Yeah. Any other thoughts? Looking at verse 23 and 24, deal with being humble in the spirit. Verse 23 reads, the poor man uses entreaties, but the rich answers roughly. Here we have a proverb that states one of the realities of our earthly lives, although by no means a desirable one. The poor man has to request things respectfully, hoping for help in his impoverished condition. How many times have we seen that? But the rich man, on the other hand, does not have to worry about his tone of voice. Sometimes a wealthy man will display a haughty attitude with little or no regard for the way in which his words may be received by others. Have you seen that before? People come across, the way they talk to you, if they got money, sometimes it's pretty bad. And the last verse, 24, a man who has friends must himself be friendly, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. The King James and the New King James seems to be a poor translation, said one commentator. The NIV says, a man of many companions may come to ruin. Now the Hebrew literally says a man of friends will come to destruction. Think about that for a minute. How can you be a friend to everyone? Why not? Some don't want you to be. What might you have to do to some folks to be friendly to them? Bow down or lower your standards? And that's what you have to be careful about. You don't want to lower your Christian standards to be their friend. The meaning here is that a person who sets out to make everyone a friend will at some point compromise righteousness in order to make friends of those who are evil as well as those who are righteous. Need to be very careful. So-called friends who are evil will disappear in time of need. What kind of friends did the prodigal son have when he ran out of money? Huh? Yeah. Yeah. They only hung around him when he was buying the drinks at the bar, if you will. Had lots of money. But when the money ran out, they scattered. They left him. The important thing to remember is that what is precious is not the number of friends you have, but the quality of the friendship. I'm going to say it again. What is precious is not the number of friends you have, but the quality of the friendship. So very important. Solomon says here in the line of this proverb, a friend that sticks closer than a brother will be one who stands up for another no matter the personal risk. That kind of a friend is truly a blessing. Truly a blessing. Any thoughts on chapter 18? Yes, Brian. What good does it do? Yeah. Yeah. That's right. That's right. Doesn't do any good. It benefits no one. Yes, that's right. Oh, big time you will. Big time you will. That's an excellent point. Yes. Yeah. 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 Give them no satisfaction. Just walk away. Excellent point. Any other comments on chapter 18? Okay, let's look at, we got a few minutes left still. In chapter 19, first 11 verses in chapter 19 deal with having a proper attitude toward business. The first 3 verses talk about to be honest. Integrity is the cornerstone of success. Verse 1 reads, "Better is the poor who walks in his integrity than one who is perverse in his lips and is a fool. It is better to be poor and honest than to be wealthy and dishonest." Yeah, if a person proves himself dishonest even once, thereafter you never know whether to believe him or not. So very true. Tell kids, don't ever lie to me, because once you lie to me, I don't know if I can ever trust you again. And your integrity is so important. Thoughts or comments? Verse 2. "Also, it is not good for a soul to be without knowledge, and he sins who hastens with his feet." I like the NIV translation a little better for this verse. It reads, "It is not good to have zeal without knowledge, nor to be hasty and miss the way." Solomon says here, refrain from acting hastily without careful deliberation. What happens when a person has lots of zeal or enthusiasm for something but doesn't possess the facts or knowledge about the subject? Trouble occurs. Usually makes a fool of himself, doesn't he? Tries to get involved when he doesn't really know. A lot of times it will result in unrighteous behavior. You see, zeal without godly knowledge can result in unrighteous behavior. Turn over with me to Romans 10. In Romans, the 10th chapter, verses 2 and 3, Paul writes here, "For I bear them witness that they have a zeal for God, but not according to knowledge. For they, being ignorant of God's righteousness and seeking to establish their own righteousness, have not submitted to the righteousness of God." Have to be careful here. You must have understanding, righteous knowledge. That's what we're warned here about. Any thoughts? Yeah, a lot of these are man's ideas, not God's ideas, not God's command. Have to be so careful. Yeah, you're right. Many religious organizations get started that way. Any other comments? Moving on. Yes, Jerry. Exactly. And that is actually does more harm than good. Because that zeal, that enthusiasm they have of understanding what you are saying is that they want to spread that. And they're spreading false truth. So that's why it's not good. Yes? Yeah. 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 And it can get ridiculous. What color the songbooks are, what color of the carpet. Yes, Dustin. Yeah. Yeah. That's a great example of I'll use the word unrighteous zeal. Is that unrighteous zeal? Being wrong, but being what he thought was doing right? Yeah. Yeah, it'd be hard. It'd be hard. Other comments? Yeah. Yeah. Oxymoron. Oh, yeah. Tommy on Wednesday night said something. Yeah, yeah. Tommy said something Wednesday night that's so true. He said, studying for the class that he's been teaching, he's probably studied and learned more than anybody else. And that's a fact. When you teach a class, and anybody who's ever taught a class, I think would agree with me, you want to be right. You want to make sure that what you say is truthful. James 3:1. Okay. Any other thoughts? Well, maybe this is a good place. It's right at a quarter till. So thank you so much for your attention, and we'll be dismissed.